I'd call the meeting to order and we could take roll, Ms. Huff.
Okay. Roberta Abdul Salam. Robbie Ash. Stacey Blakely.
Present.
Jim Durrett. William Floyd.
I'm present.
Roderick Frierson.
Present.
Ryan Glover. Rita Hardage.
Present.
Russell McMurray. Al Pond.
Present.
Catherine Powers.
Present.
Rita Scott.
Present.
Reginald Snyder. Christopher Tomlinson.
Present.
Thomas Worthy. There are 8 board members present.
Thank you. First item on the agenda are the minutes. I'd like to have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes from the prior meeting.
I move to approve. This is Rod Frierson.
Hardage seconds.
All right, Frierson, motion for approval, Hardage second. Are there any abstentions? Are there any no votes? The minutes, if not, the motion passes. The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for procurement of technical support services for automated fare collections system, REAE 48067, presented by David Emery.
Thank you and good morning, Chairman Pond, members of the Planning and Capital Programs Committee, Mr. Parker, Mr. Renew. I'm David Emery. I'm Senior Director of Customer Experience Innovation, and I will be presenting the recommendation for procurement of technical support services for our AFC 2.0 project. This is a follow-up to a briefing that this committee received in January from our Chief Customer Experience Officer, Ms. Allen, where we received authorization to move ahead with this selection process, and I will be presenting the results of that selection and our recommendation for how to move forward with this work. Next slide, please. So just to review the context here, AFC 2.0 is our effort to completely overhaul and replace our fare collection system. The current system is about 15 years old. It's approaching the end of useful life, and our goals with the new system are really threefold. We want to enhance the customer experience, we want to optimize agency operations, and then finally reduce costs for the authority. The new system will combine multiple existing systems, including obviously our existing breeze system, mobile ticketing system, and our parking payment system into a single integrated system. And it will be introducing several key features that are state of the practice with fare collection now. That includes an account-based system so that our customers have access to all aspects of the payment experience through a single account. Also, open architecture design so that we can do integrations with third-party partners more easily, and also support future upgrades and upkeep of the system. And then finally, we'll be introducing open payments, which refers to a number of emerging payment technologies, including contactless credit cards, mobile wallets, and other types of payments like that. So next slide, please. This slide, I believe you saw in January, but we wanted to return to this. This shows the organizational structure for the AFC 2.0 project. One thing I'll note that's changed since January is that I've assumed my role within customer experience. So I will serve as the program director here in the middle of this chart, continuing under the direction of the Chief Customer Experience Officer, Ms. Allen. We'll also be working very closely with a project manager assigned by our capital programs group, Mr. Michael Jones, as well as with a steering committee of internal stakeholders here at MARTA from other departments that have an interest in fare collection. And finally, we'll be working with our regional partners. We do anticipate this being a regional system similar to the existing breeze system. And there is important work being done by ATL around fare policy that we are coordinating very closely with. The bottom half of this slide shows some of the actual work that's been done and that will be done. We're wrapping up the initial planning exercises that included system assessment, some customer journey mapping, the development of the concept of operations for the new system, and finally this project delivery strategy. We are interested in looking at some alternative delivery methods that could involve greater roles for private sector partners, and something that we'll be looking at very closely here. Then finally, the box here kind of in orange is the work that will be covered by this technical support services contract that we're bringing before you today. And that will be primarily the development and the conducting of the solicitation for the new AFC 2.0 system, as well as ongoing oversight of the implementation. Next slide, please. This shows you the timeline for the work, and we also call out the pardon me, the specific phases that will be part of the technical support services work. In terms of the timeline, this is where we are here, June of 21. We're just wrapping up that initial planning phase, and as well as procurement for this technical support services partner, and then we'll be moving forward into the development of the actual solicitation for the new system. We expect that will take probably the remainder of this calendar year, over the next 6 months. And so that would include the phase 1 and phase 2 of the support services contract, which would be to review the work done to date, review the existing systems, and then phase 2 would be to develop technical specifications for the new system. We anticipate that the actual solicitation would happen next year and would cover most of calendar year 2022. That would be supported by phase 3 of the technical support services contract. And our hope is that we would have an actual AFC vendor in place around next fall of 22. Finally, phase 4 will be the implementation of the new system, so the actual installation and deployment of our next generation FARA system. That will be phase 4 of the support services contract, and we anticipate that could take 3 or 4 years. We show this going out through October of 26, but obviously there could be it could be more or less depending on the specific scope. And the way we've set up this contract is that it will include a 3-year base term with an option for up to 4 individual 1-year extensions. So that allows us to have this consultant engaged anywhere between 3 and 7 years, depending on how long the implementation takes. But again, we're estimating about 5 years, and we call it Summerhill BRT here because we're hoping that could be maybe an initial pilot deployment of some of the new AFC technology, and then hopefully the entire system will be in place sometime around 2026 thereabouts. Next slide, please. So to review the competitive process that we've been through over the last couple months, we advertised this contract in March. We had strong interest in it. 82 firms retrieved the solicitation, and we had 6 firms submitting proposals. You can see them listed there. All of the proposals were deemed responsive. Diversity inclusion did establish a DB goal of 18% for this project, which all of the proponents agreed to meet. And our source evaluation committee independently scored the proposals. I should note that our internal committee, which scores proposals, was supported by a technical evaluation team, which included subject matter experts from within MARTA, as well as representatives from each of the regional partners that are part of the existing BRIES system. So there was regional participation in this decision, and we're thankful for their input. It's very valuable. The result of the scoring was that we decided to shortlist 2 firms for further consideration. Those were AECOM and WSP. And next slide, please. And the result of the interviews and the rescoring was that our final recommendation is the firm led by AECOM Technical Services. AECOM, of course, one of the major planning and engineering firms based in Los Angeles, has a large office here in Atlanta, right at Art Center Station. They'll be supported by 5 subcontractors. You can see listed here. I think all of these subcontractors bring expertise, specialty expertise that aligns well with our goals for the AFC 2.0 project. Transport Group is a project management firm. They'll be focused primarily on the implementation oversight in phase 4. NITI and AVI Group both bring a lot of technology expertise. Obviously, this is going to be a very technology-driven project. Carter specializes in alternative delivery. I mentioned before that's going to be a big focus. And then finally, First Partner is a British firm that specializes in contactless payment and other emerging payment technology. So I think all of these firms kind of complement each other and align well with what we're hoping to accomplish with this project. The recommended proponent has committed to DB participation of 25%, which exceeds the goal that we had set of 18%, and it possibly could be larger. It depends on how work ends up being divided between the different tasks, but they've set 25% as a minimum. I will note quickly that one of the firms will be doing work in Georgia for the first time, so their DB certification is pending with Georgia DOT, but they've done DB work in many other states, and we don't anticipate any issues there. We just want to flag that as something that we are monitoring, and we'll make sure that certification is obtained. And again, we don't expect any issue with that. So finally, our recommendation here is to move forward with the AECOM team, and we are seeking authorization to spend no more than the amount you see there, $2,135,564, to cover phases 1, 2, and 3 of this work. And those phases are the development and the conducting of the solicitation. We do plan to come back at a later date for phase 4. I mentioned phase 4 is the actual implementation oversight that we expect will begin once the AFC vendor is in place, likely in late 2022. But we wanted to focus just on these first 3 phases. We feel like we'll have a better sense for the scope and the cost of phase 4 after we've done some of the initial work around specifications development. So we will be coming back at a later date for authorization for phase 4. But our request today is for authorization to spend up to that amount on phases 1, 2, and 3 with this AECOM team to move forward with our next generation fare collection system. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will hand it back to you.
Okay. Before we have a discussion. Could I have a motion and a second, please?
This is Hardage, I move.
Floyd, I'll second.
Okay, motion by Hardage, second by Floyd. Are there any questions for David? David, I do have one. What is the overall cost of the entire program, the equipment and everything? I know you don't have a hard number, but I've just sort of a range. What is the dollars of that program anticipated to be?
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, we don't have a specific number. I mean, we do have a rough order of magnitude cost. I don't have that right in front of me, but I can.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
David, this is Rhonda. Yeah, it's at last check, I believe that rough order of magnitude was somewhere around 100 million to a little bit over that. But again, some of that is capital, and other are upgrades, kind of, or maintenance over the system over a number of years. So between 10 to 15 years. So it's quite a substantial leap, but we have not, fully determined what that exact scope will be. So that's why we're saying that's a rough order of magnitude, because as we begin to do more work with this consultant, we'll begin to narrow the scope and know more about how much we should expect that cost to be.
Okay.
Chairman,
Mr. Chairman,
can I
if I
just
may,
can I-
this is Roberta.
Yes, Ms.
I'm sorry,
Avis.
Jeff. I wanted to find out. I've noticed that on the slides that there's a participation or working regionally with other transit agencies, including ATL. Will they bear any of the costs for developing this system?
I think that's something that we will. I think we're in conversations right now with ATL about kind of how exactly that partnership will work. I mean, I think part of the idea with the different procurement, the alternative delivery methods we're looking at, is that we want to provide as much funding flexibility as possible. So I think some of these decisions around specific funding mechanisms have yet to be determined, but we will be working, I think, just generally with ATL around coordination with their fare policy efforts and fare coordination efforts going forward.
Thank you.
And this is Chris. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yes,
No,
go
I just
ahead.
wanted to add just a couple of points. One, to mention, we fully expect that that the regional partners will as they have with the Breeze system, pay their fair share along the way, you know, we're at a point in time where we need to be the initiator of this, with full expectation that the regional partners will you know, be part of the implementation and work out those details along the way. I do want to mention, and this sort of colors that, you know, the reason for this, you know, the need to move forward now is, you know, as Rhonda had said, you know, we're in the $100 million area around the implementation of a system like this, and like that's a rough order of magnitude. But it's important to put it in context. If you look back to the origins of, or the beginning of the Breeze system, which is, you know, was procured, I believe, back in 2003 or 4 timeframe. You know, I think we're well in excess of paying Cubic something like $600 million over the life of, is that right? Order of magnitude, Rhonda? That's I don't want to misspeak.
Yeah, I believe that is correct.
It's a significant number. And so, you know, we really want to make sure that the arrangement with whomever we hire as the provider of our system, that we're going into this with a long-term relationship. So how we pay for this system and the services associated with that will be really evaluated and put forward in a procurement model, so that we can really make sure that we've got a long-term relationship, as opposed to, you know, incrementally executing agreements with a provider over, you know, in this case, we're approaching 20 years with Cubic. So
I think Chris Tomlinson wanted to comment. Chris?
Yeah, couple of things. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I echo everything that Jeff just said, as well as David. I think this is one of MARTA's most critical projects for customer-facing systems and opening up possibilities for different ways of payment. And then to Roberta's question, I have no problem saying it. I think financial participation from the regional partners is key, both as far as operating costs, which, as Jeff said, that's something that happens today. There's some participation, but also in the system. One of the things that we'll be working on from an ATL perspective is not only working with MART, but continuing to talk to the regional partners about the criticality, as well as the timeline, so that they can ask the questions and do what's necessary to make sure they see the value and planning for this and for the financial participation. This is every bit as critical as any expansion project that MART is looking at, and it's really going to open up possibilities for customers. So I'm fully supportive, and I know Jeff is already thinking through you know, different procurement strategies to, again, just really open up the possibilities for MARTA and this system. So wholeheartedly support these efforts and the work that's been done to date.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Huff, I noticed that Ms. Abdul Salam joined right after you took roll, so I assume you have her checked off.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, I'll call the question. Are there any abstentions? Are there any no votes? The motion passes. The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for architectural engineering design services for the 5 Point Station transformation, and that will be presented by Marcia Beaumont.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Pond, Mayor Floyd, Ms. Scott, Mr. Parker, board members, Mr. Renew. Welcome to our first board committee meeting. Today, I'm here to present the resolution asking you to authorize the award of a contract for the architectural and engineering services for the 5 Points Station transformation. That's REI AE 47796. Next slide, please. Just as a bit of background, you'll recall that you approved a sequencing plan for the MARTA Atlanta program, which includes the 5 Points Transformation Project. That happened in January of 2019. And since that time, we have been conducting a variety of studies to prepare for this moment. We've been working closely with the City of Atlanta, with Central Atlanta Progress, with some of the private developers who have interest in projects in the immediate area, as well as a number of other stakeholders. Next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in this current schedule, you can see that we are at the procurement for the design phase with, of course, time to fully execute the contract. We have started the process for the selection of a CMAR, construction manager at risk, which will be the delivery method for this project. And we expect to bring that to the board in October of this year for having gone through a selection process for that. Then, of course, as soon as the A&E is under contract, we will move into the design phase, move into the pre-construction assessment work with the CMAR as soon as they are onboarded. And we anticipate to start the implementation of the project in April of 22. There's a lot of prep work before the actual deconstruction begins. And the goal is to finish the project by the end of 2025 so that we have a complete plaza area and a new station area in time for both the World Cup that is coming in 2026 and the stage set for the future TOD. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've done quite a bit of work since the this project came onto our radar. So we have conducted a variety of feasibility studies that I'll be talking about later in the presentation. We've worked with some student groups at Georgia Tech for some design ideas, and we've worked with the leadership program at the Urban Land Institute, their MTAP program, who did a remarkable job helping us to really understand a lot about the area and how to envision a great community space as part of the station. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've done a number of feasibility studies, and I'm just going to run through some of those very quickly. A big portion of this is the deconstruction of the canopy, and we ran through the feasibility study to determine that there is in fact a methodology to safely do the deconstruction while keeping the station fully active. Next slide, please. There is some interest that the city has expressed in making a connection of Broad Street between Marietta and Alabama Street. And so we have tested the feasibility of that, and we're in conversation with the City of Atlanta and other stakeholders to just determine if that makes sense, and if so, what configuration is most beneficial to the operation of the station area. Next slide, please. I'm sure you're all familiar with the station and the large opening from the plaza level where you can see down to the concourse. And in order to create this new plaza and the platform for the future TOD, we will be closing the area that's affectionately known as the drum, and of course removing the solar sign that hangs above it. The feasibility study indicates, again, a methodology for being able to do that while keeping the station active. Next slide, please. And of course, a very important part of this whole study and effort is the planning for a future transit-oriented development. This is one of the most important locations in the Atlanta metro area for a TOD, and at the center of so many activity components and a lot of other growth in the area. And so we did do an analysis to ensure that with all of the changes that are being imagined, that there's still a viable path forward for developing a vertical construction above the station plaza. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we worked with the Georgia Tech student group. It's always fun and interesting, but they come up with some great ideas for our consideration. And the students chose to look at the area through a sustainability lens, and that's both economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. And they gave us some very interesting ideas for us to consider during the design phase, built some models for us, did a lot of analyses and drawings to help us imagine what that space could be. Next, please. And then the ULI group, the list on the left-hand side of the slide shows all the different research pieces that they did about this area, about how it could be utilized, about what it has been in the past and what it can be in the future, and how it connects to community. And they helped us to envision a way to transform it in a couple of phases to this new plaza area that would perhaps accommodate bus operations on itself, as well as, if you'll go to the next slide, please, as well as the longer term vision for when there is the TOD developed, but maintaining some of the wonderful open community spaces that we will all enjoy having. Next slide, please. So the key scope items in this A&E contract will be to design the full deconstruction of the canopy, the closure of the drum, a potential connection for Broad Street, laying the groundwork for being able to accommodate the TOD, as well as providing some construction support given the CMAR delivery method. We want the A&E and the construction team to be working closely together for maximum efficiency. As I mentioned, all this work needs to be done while we keep the station fully activated and safe and still a good environment for our customers to navigate. And we want to get all of this work done prior to the World Cup games. Next slide, please. I would like to note that we have had very active participation from our City of Atlanta partners throughout the various studies and processes, and in particular, Kevin Bacon, representing the City of Atlanta, participated on the Source Evaluation Committee. The overall project has a budget of $150 million. And as I mentioned earlier, the CMAR procurement is in process now. Next slide, please. We did conduct a virtual conference once we posted the procurement. We received 9 team proposals, all of which were deemed responsive. The SEC members did their independent scoring and selected 5 teams for interviews. And then based on those interviews, several team members felt that they learned some new things about the team and independently did some rescoring that allowed us to do a final ranking of the teams. In the initial proposals, we had some of the teams that committed to meeting the 31% DBE goal and 2 teams that committed to exceeding that DBE goal. Next slide, please. The team that we are recommending be selected is the Skidmore, Owings, Merrill team. They have put together quite a remarkable team of people with the right kind of expertise and experience to ensure that this project is going to be successful. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more in depth about their experience coming to us with all of the necessary things to ensure that this project is successful. They have committed to meeting and exceeding the 31% DBE goal and are working actively to assign different components of the project to their DBE teammates. Next slide, please. So the leadership for this project, Marla Gale will be the project manager. She is a managing director with SOM and has vast experience in projects exactly like the one that we're embarking on. Dean Collins is the deputy project manager. He is with Access Infrastructure. His firm is actually part of the station rehab program. So he is also familiar with MARTA and how to do business with us, and has been very actively engaged on his projects to date. Pritam Biswas is the Director of Structural Engineering for SOM and has a lot of experience on projects just like this, particularly projects where you're working in and around active rail lines and rail stations. So the structural component of this is most significant. So we're very anxious to have the perfect lead for that as well. SOM is a global company with experience all over the world, all over this country, with projects just like the one that we are embarking on. Next slide, please. So among the evaluation criteria, we were particularly interested in recent experience that they had with rail stations that had elements that related exactly to the scope of the 5 Points project. And as you can see here, they have worked on an array of projects, many of which included deconstruction elements, a lot of construction during active use of the station, a lot of overbuilds, all components that are important to us. Next slide, please. They also have a lot of experience working with the delivery method of construction manager at risk. They understand what the relationship needs to be and how valuable that partnership is in developing a successful project on time and on budget. Next slide, please. As I mentioned and showed in some of the other projects, project information, they do have a lot of experience working over active rail lines. And for those of you who were able to come to the APTA conference in New York City and joined us for the tour of Hudson Yards, where you saw the result of a lot of construction of a new station over the active rail lines. They were the team leading that effort. So just one example of their experience in that area. Next slide, please. A lot of their projects include, we are very interested in how we bring natural light to the station, how we really activate it so that the customers have the best possible experience. And again, they have a lot of project experience in that realm. Next slide, please. And they also have very extensive relationships with developers and have worked on numerous transit-oriented development projects. So that expertise and that knowledge will be very important to us as we develop the near-term plan, but with an eye to the long-term future of this property. Next slide, please. And so in summary, the request coming before you today is based on the total project budget of $150 million. The Source Evaluation Committee is recommending that we select that you approve the selection of the Skidmore, Owings, Merrill team for the A&E services. This contract will be through 2026, and our funding request is for $15 million. And with that, I will just ask for your approval of this request.
Thank you, Marsha. Could I get a motion for approval in a second, please?
So moved, Roberta.
Second, Katie.
Who was the second?
Katie Powers.
Okay. So a motion by Ms. Abdul-Salam and a second by Ms. Powers. All right, questions for Marsha?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Rod.
yeah, Marsha, once again, thank you for the presentation. This is a very complex project, and just looking at the engineering diagrams and the design. I think you got the right companies involved. Once again, I was one of those who did have the opportunity to tour the Hudson Yard and see the work that they did in the tunnel underneath the Hudson Yard in order to put that transit system in place. Very, very complicated and complex, and so I'm glad to see that they're on board. But my question has to do also with the timeline. You're saying that we'll be finished with this project by 2026. That's kind of I don't know if that's enough time. I guess you got a lot going on to get that done. So is that a reasonable time in conjunction with all that's happening?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for your feedback on the selection. And yes, as part of the feasibility study, we did have schedulers as part of the team who looked long and hard at different options for how we could do the construction, which is the most complicated part of this, as well as the other elements, and putting those schedules together for the deconstruction and then the new build, if you will, of the improved plaza area and all the other components. Yes, we can deliver this project on time. We will deliver this project on time. We have given ourselves a buffer to ensure that we have that kind of last little bit of cleanup time, since the World Cup is in 2026. We have set the delivery schedule to 2025 so that we have a little buffer in there, but we do believe with full confidence that we can deliver this project on time.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Chairman Pond, this is Stacy Blakely. I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Blakely.
Marsha, I did some research because I'm not familiar with SOM. And so I did some research and realized that they are the only firm that did not have a local presence here. And so knowing that the other firms are also highly qualified, I wanted to know why we were selecting a firm that's basically out of state, as opposed to firms who have a local presence here and who utilize and support our system.
Very, very good point. So because of the very complex nature of this, because of all the technical details of this, we felt that it was first and foremost important to have a team that had vast experience with this very type of project. And although other teams had some experience with parts of this, there was no team and certainly no lead that had the extent of hands-on experience. Many of the other firms were on teams where they played a small role, but none of them had the lead role for complex projects of this nature to the extent that SOM did. And so we felt that because of how important this project is, it was most important to have that level of expertise. Everybody else is local. And quite frankly, with the virtual environment that we've all been working in, we've demonstrated that it is not a barrier to success to work with people who are not located right in the space. But I understand your perspective, but we felt that we really had to pick the most qualified firm.
Like this, it's always good to be aware of both have a house. And when I say in house, again, the highly qualified firms that are located here. So thank you for that response.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Marsha? Marsha, I just have one question to Gene the other day, but in your CMAR selection process, I know you will, but I think it's critical for your scoring points to put a lot of emphasis on budget control and schedule. So
yes, sir. We'll make sure that is reflected. Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Pond.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Scott.
Please.
Go ahead.
One question I have is related to the question that Ms. Blakely asked, and that is there any, are we missing out on any benefits because we're not using a local or a Georgia firm? Are we missing out on any benefits in a legislative context?
I don't think so. I'm not sure what you mean by a legislative context.
Well,
Could you
there's
expand?
legislations that benefits companies that do business in Georgia.
This is Jeff. None of those sort of preferences would be relevant here in this procurement. One thing that I do want to add is that although SMO doesn't have a local office, they're teamed with a firm, Axios, who's got tremendous amount of local experience. So and a deputy project manager who's actively working and engaged in MARTA now. So it's not like we're limiting our engagement to a firm that simply just has no relationships or experience here at MARTA. We've got a team that does have that.
Right. And
you're saying that you're saying we will have access to a local firm if necessary.
Well,
absolutely.
There is a partner that a sub-consultant, is that right, Marcia?
That's correct. That's
but
correct.
A major sub-consultant that's got local experience, well known locally. I know many of us have worked with Dean at his previous firm, who's the deputy project manager. He's actively is he the principal in charge or PM on one of our
yes.
station rehabilitation projects?
Yes, he is. He's on Indian Creek.
Right.
And all of the subs are local, so everybody else is local to the Atlanta area.
Just to respond to Mrs. Scott's question too, although the prime contract holder is SOM, if you look at the array of sub-consultants required, those sub-consultants in total will be more than 50% of the work, I would have to believe. So.
Yes. Yeah, I think the SOM piece is approximately 40% of some 35 to 40% of the final scope.
Right, I understand. Of course, the actual work will be done by those that are locally here, but I do know that there is thinking of legislation that has been introduced at the Capitol regarding firms in Georgia, was what my question was related to. And thank you for clarifying.
Are there any other questions? If not, I will call the question. Are there any abstentions? Are there any no votes? The motion passes. The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the execution of a boundary line agreement with Plowshaws, Inc. to clarify ownership of 1,860 square feet along Ponce de Leon Avenue and 926 square feet from 225 Laredo Drive, adjacent to the Laredo Garage. This discussion will be led by Robin Boyd, Director of Real Estate.
Good morning, Chairman Pond, Mayor Floyd, Mr. Parker, and members of the committee. So on this first slide, basically this was a request from Plowshares. They're the owners of the property to the south of the Laredo Garage, and they want to sell their property. But when they were in the process, they found two parcels of land that had title issues. And they approached MARTA to see if we'd be willing, it would be either them or us that are the owners, would we be willing to clarify this and memorialize that? So if you can go to the next slide. If you can see, they're very small parcels. The 1,860 square feet is landlocked inside, and that would go to plowshares. And the 926 square feet fronts on Laredo Drive, and that would come to MARTA. Both of these parcels are not being used for transit. They do not need to be used. They're actually outside of our fence now. If you could go to the next slide. When we appraise the values, the one that we will be getting is $2,000 less. So plowshares will pay us that $2,000 to make sure that everything was even. And we will approach the FTA. They do have interest in the Laredo garage. I'm not sure about these two parcels because the title wasn't clear, but we will request their concurrence. And I think that's it, unless anybody has any questions. We'd just like you to approve for us to go forward with the boundary agreement.
Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Boyd? A very large real estate transaction today, I can see.
Yeah. Important to plowshares.
I jumped the gun. I need a motion and a second, please.
This is Hardage. I move.
This is Frierson, I second.
All right, Hardage made the motion, Frierson made a second. Now, any other questions for Ms. Boyd? Okay, I'll call the question.
This is Jeff. Can I just mention that this is a very small transaction, but just so, maybe some of the newer board members aren't aware, but the MARTA Act does require that we take all real estate transactions to the board for their approval. So this is why we need to get your approval for even a transaction this small.
Okay, thank you. I'll call the question. Are there any abstentions? Are there any no votes? If not, the resolution passes. The next item on the agenda is a briefing for scarce service modifications by Don Williams.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Floyd, and members of the committee, and Mr. Parker. Say happy Thursday to everyone. This is a briefing on the proposed service modifications for August 2021. Next slide. So briefly, in terms of what we're doing, we have a total of 10 routes that we are modifying this, 2 of which are new. And the key objectives for this service modifications are certainly the Title VI adherence, and just a little bit background on that. If you remember back in April, we put service back in, and we also adjusted some routes. But when we looked at the Title VI, there was undue burden on the low-income class, although that's not necessarily a violation. It is a sensitive area. And so what we're doing with this is coming back and adjusting that. So we've added some trips back into some of the routes, so we'll be below a 25% threshold. The other thing that we're doing as part of this modification process is to look at the 196. What we're doing here is an operational improvement where we're adjusting the layover for the 196. We have some safety concerns with regards to the number of buses that they lay over. And so we're modifying that this go around. And then additionally, we're adding 2 new Clayton County bus routes. These are routes that were supposed to be put in prior to the pandemic. And so what we're doing now is coming back and making those modifications. Next slide. So here again is just a quick summary of all the routes that have been adjusted or modified. And again, the 2 new routes that we're adding, the 197, that's the Battle Creek, and then the 198 South Lake. And again, what we're doing is This is part of the 15th Amendment, and so what we have done is the initial network that was outlined in that amendment, and we're going ahead and making sure that we complete those the bus network. Next slide. So with the proposed route 197, 198, what we're doing is that for 197, we are looking at a frequency of about 45 minutes during the peak period, and then 60 minutes during the off-peak. And during the weekday, the route will operate from 5 a.m. to midnight, and then on weekends, 6 a.m. to midnight. And if you look at the map, you see that these routes are providing what we are calling the east-west connectivity for Clayton County. That's something that we were looking to do as part of the initial network. And again, this is going to complete the 15th Amendment initial network. The 198 similarly is a frequency of 45 minutes during the peak period and then 60 minutes off peak. When we looked at the estimated O&M costs on this, it's about $2 million. And again, that's an ongoing cost. Next slide. What I want to do here is just briefly remind the committee of the network that was proposed. This is the total number of routes that are servicing the Clayton County area. And again, with the 197 and 198, what we've done is complete that initial network that was outlined in the 14th and 15th Amendment. However, there's still ongoing planning processes in place. We have the Clayton County Justice Transit Center Hub. That was first phase was completed. We're looking to complete the second phase this year. And then there's the bus shelter and benches program. That's part of the 1,000 amenities program that we are looking to do for the system-wide. And so we're completing those shelters and benches in Clayton County. And then certainly there's the Clayton County high capacity study that we're doing, and we're looking at the potential for BRT and commuter rail in Clayton County. We have ongoing discussions with Fort Gillum and the city of Morrow in terms of transit planning for those two particular cities. And of course, there's the Clayton County Transit System Plan, which is going to expand upon what's already there in terms of transit hubs, routes, and bus stop amenities. Next slide. So the public hearings for the proposed service modification was held on June 9th and 12th, and Tony Thornton is coming up right behind me. It's going to give you the results of that, and then what we're doing is once we get the committee to approve, we're looking to have the proposed service modifications adopted at the July 15th board meeting, and the service will start August 14th, 2021. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Don. Are there any questions for Don? If not, we will have a follow-on briefing by Tony Thornton on the service modification public hearing process and results.
Good morning, Chairman Pond, Vice Chair Floyd, Mr. Parker, and board members. I will be providing the results of the public hearing on the proposed service modifications for August 2021. Next slide, please. External Affairs worked with the Planning Department to provide information about the proposed service modifications in Clayton County to ensure the public had an opportunity to provide feedback on the proposals. And we held two virtual public hearings on June 9th in the evening, and then to ensure we had as many people to participate as possible on a Saturday, June 12th in the AM. And we used various tactics to engage our stakeholders of the area residents and customers. And we just wanted to ensure that the public was adequately informed about the proposed service modifications. Next slide, please. The proposed service changes that we advertised included, as Don touched on earlier, Route 196 Upper Riverdale South Lake, Route 197 Battle Creek Road, and Route 198 South Lake Parkway. Proposed Route 196 proposed realignment to improve operation efficiency on its southbound trips. And Route 197 is a new route proposed to operate between Riverdale Town Center and Davidson Parkway near State Highway 138 intersection near Stockbridge. And Route 198 is also a new route proposed to operate between Riverdale Town Center and the South Lake Mall. Next slide, please. Due to the COVID-19 concerns and the governor declaring a public health state of emergency, the hearings were held virtually, but also to provide the public an opportunity to review maps, routing, and adjustments, the proposed service modifications. We held a 1-hour virtual community exchange that preceded the public hearings. And attendees were able to ask questions in the Q&A section of this platform and hear a live response from the MARTA service planners. Additionally, hearings were streamed live on Facebook and on YouTube, and folks could leave their comments on that platform as well. We also provided a dial-in option for our customers. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, various tactics were used for the public engagement. Some included street signs that were placed along routes of the impacted areas. We sent out just over 2,800 emails, and they were sent to our jurisdictional partners and stakeholders, and we asked them to share this information with their network and on their social media pages. Also, social media messages were posted on MARTA's Twitter, Facebook, and Nextdoor pages. And of course, a press release was issued by MARTA Communications to advertise the meetings. Next slide, please. As you see here with the signs, in addition, our outreach activities, our legal ad that we published on June 4th and 7th included several publications in addition to the AJC. Some just included our Clayton News, our South Fulton neighbor, and just some others. And in addition to those published ads, outreach consisted of station canvassing, as you can see here with some of the pictures with the signs posted in different areas. We distributed over 3,000 flyers, and they were distributed to Clayton County government centers and libraries. And we had 50 street signs that, again, were placed strategically at the busiest bus stops and at rail stations where our Clayton County bus routes feed into, which is College Park Station, East Point, and Lakewood stations. Next slide, please. Of course, Title VI was taken into consideration. All of our public hearing collateral, such as our signage, our ads, our flyers, were printed in Spanish. And there's an information line at the bottom of the collateral to let people know if they need to request any of this collateral in another language or an accessible format, that it's available to them. We also reached out to our LEP communities, and the our public hearing information was shared with cultural groups and organizations such as the Latin American Association and others. Next slide, please. Now, our digital outreach has been very effective. As you see there, we actually put together a video that went through the actual proposed service changes, and we had 531 views that looked at that video. Our social media impacts, we had 258 views on Facebook, and with Twitter, 9 retweets. And on our Nextdoor, which is somewhat new, we've used in the last year, advertising on Nextdoor, we had close over 116,000 impressions. And what's also very exciting is our text message campaign. We sent out over 94,000 text messages, and because we were targeting the Clayton County area, 80% were Clayton County residents. Next slide, please. Now, as far as the attendance, Again, the digital outreach has been very effective because as you see here with our June 9th public hearing, we had 227 attendees that viewed the public hearing. And on June 12th, we had 146 that viewed. Of the two meetings, we had 5 comments that come in and 1 that was just additional feedback to kind of thank us for providing the information. Next slide. As you can see here with the summary of comments that come in, we received 6 comments, but 4 of the 6 were comments related to routing, such as whether or not we could turn left onto a certain street or if it was going to extend to South Lake Mall, transfers on the Filter Road. Because we had the community exchange, we were able to address these questions, like allowing the participant to know that our Route 198 will be going into South Lake Mall. And we also received feedback asking us to take a look at whether or not MARTA could extend a route going to the Six Flags Center. So those are some of the comments we received. Next slide. Now, of course, pending board approval, the service modifications will go into effect on August 14th, 2021. And in order to follow up and make sure that our jurisdictional partners, our stakeholders, and our customers will be notified, we'll be using similar tactics that we used earlier, such as the route signage, the canvassing of the stations and government centers, and then our social media and email blast. So this concludes the presentation. Next slide, if you have any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Mrs. Thornton? If not, we'll move to the next item, which will be the resolution authorizing approval of the service modifications for the August 14th board meeting. Don Williams.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, Ms. Parker, and members of the committee, this is a resolution requesting board adoption of the service modification as proposed for the August 14th, 2021. As you noted in the public hearing, we did get feedback, and those issues that we will take to and look at as we look at modifying in the future. And if there's any other questions, I'll be more than willing to help answer those questions. Excuse me.
Okay. Can I get a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
Who was that?
Roberta.
Okay. Is that Bill Salama? Second?
Yes, sir.
Second by Rod Fryer.
Okay, second by Rod Fryer. All right. Any questions for Don? Don, I do have one question. Refresh our memory for the board. How often do we look at these modifications? Is it 3 times a year?
Yes, sir. We do it 3 times a year: April, August, and December.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll call the question. Are there any abstentions? Any no votes? The resolution passes. Are there any other matters to come before this committee?
Mr. Chairman, a quick question, please.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Floyd.
This is for Mr. Parker, but are we assume that in July, all of our meetings will be in-person meetings?
This is Jeff. That's my assumption. I don't know if Liz wants to add any commentary to that. As I think many people know, the governor, I guess effective July 1, will be stopping the emergency order, and without that emergency order, the open meetings, the state's open meetings law, I believe, requires us to hold our meetings in person.
This is Liz.
Correct.
Yes, that's correct.
You know, we have, I think some of you may have seen the boardroom, although many of you haven't been there for well over a year, but, we have installed a variety of safety devices and, have some precautions that are in place to make sure that when we do return in July, that we've got a safe environment for everyone.
Are there any other matters to,
Well, one more follow-up question. I'm sorry. What about requiring vaccinations in the building? I mean, I'm curious as to what is the requirement or is there one at all? Or how are you all going to deal with that issue?
At this point in time, we haven't made any decisions around requiring employees to be vaccinated. Our focus continues to be on working to encourage our employees to get vaccinated. We had a series of, actually one today. We've had our second clinics at our facilities, one on, losing track of my days of the week. I think one on Monday here at headquarters, and then yesterday and today at Laredo Garage, working with CVS to make some vaccinations really easy for our employees to get them. So we'll continue to do that. Luz is doing a raffle to encourage our staff to get vaccinated, a raffle for our employees who have been vaccinated, and tactics like that just to continue to increase that participation.
anything else for Jeff? Well, if not, we'll adjourn the meeting, and the next committee meeting is Operations and Safety.
Mr. Berta, can you take the Operations and Safety Committee meeting? I don't think Mr. Worthy is on.
Yes, I can do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is it morning still? Good morning. Operations and Safety Committee, approval of the May 27th, 2021 minutes.
I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Roll. Ms. Roberta.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, can I call the roll first?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Roberta Abdul Salam.
Present.
Robbie Ash. Stacy Blakely.
Present.
Jim Dewart. William Floyd.
Present.
Roderick Frierson. Ryan Glover. Rita Hardage.
Present.
Russell McMurray. Al Pond.
Present.
Catherine Powers.
Present.
Rita Scott.
Present.
Reginald Snyder. Christopher Tomlinson. Thomas Worthy.
Ms. Huff, I did not hear my name.
Roderick Frierson. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Huff.
8 board members present.
Thank you. Okay. Let's first get to the approval of the May 27th, 2021 Operation and Safety Committee meeting minutes. Can I get a motion for approval?
This is Hardage. I move to approve.
Pond, second.
Thank you both. Are there any abstentions to this? Any objections to approval of the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Second item on the agenda today is a resolution authorizing an award of a contract for the procurement of wheel turning machines, maintenance, and repair services. And it'll be presented to us today by Douglas Miller, Director of Rail Car Maintenance. Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Good morning, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Parker, Mr. Greenwood, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. May I direct your attention to the agenda item requesting a resolution authorizing award of a contract for the procurement of rail car wheel truing machines, maintenance and repair services, RFP P45-253. The requested resolution authorizes the general manager / CEO or his delegate to enter into a contract with Simmons Machine Tool Corporation in the amount of $233,490. Next slide, please. I will speak to these three areas and explain why this contract is needed and is cost effective. Next slide, please. This is a reoccurring 2-year single source contract with one option year being funded with local operating funds from the approved fiscal 2022 budget. Funds for subsequent fiscal years will be included in subsequent annual budgets. The average annual expenditure will be approximately $77,830. The last contract it averaged about was a 3-year contract, and it also averaged about $77,500. So it's only a little bit more. We think that's a good deal. Next slide, please. Well, back up one. I didn't realize you progressed it too. Business purpose. Wheel truing machines are used to adjust railcar wheels to their correct profiles. Correct wheel profiles mitigate risk of derailment and remove rail flats. I think everybody that's ridden our system has occasionally been on a car and been on top of a flat, and you can feel it sometimes bumping down the track. This is what we use to get rid of those flats, among other things. This contract is essential to keep our railcar wheels in serviceable and safe conditions. We have 3 Simmons machines. The Avondale machine is 33 years old, the South Yard machine is 27 years old, and the Armor machine is about 18 years old. These machines have had some upgrades, but are starting to reach the end of their life cycle and will eventually need overhaul or possible replacement. There is an upcoming procurement for new controls to help extend the life of these machines. MARTA performs all the basic maintenance and many repairs in-house. These contracts provide MARTA with essential scheduled and unscheduled machine support services and parts required to maintain the machine. The way this contract is set up, it contains estimates for parts and labors over the 3-year period, but it's only billed as we use it. So the last 3-year contract worked out well. We think we have a good idea for the next one also. Next slide, please. Our procurement considerations. As the original equipment manufacturer, the OEM for MARTA's 3 Simmons wheel truing machines, Simmons Machine Tool Corporation has the experience, training, technical expertise, and parts, most of which they're the only provider of, required to provide MARTA with rapid, responsible technical expertise and the support MARTA requires to keep the wheel truing machines operational 365 days a year. They are really good. They're located in New York, and they come down once a year and give the machines a thorough inspection before flat season. We just recently finished it for this year, and they've had to come down occasionally to do repairs, but most of the time they are able to help us either by phone call, teleconference, send us software, whatever the issue is. They work with our maintenance staff and engineering department and are super responsive and super good. We're really happy with the level of response we've gotten from them. The Department of Audit has conducted an analysis and determined the price to be fair and reasonable. There is no DBE requirement in this contract as it is a single source contract. OEM parts and labor are provided internally by Simmons. there's not really any consistent shipping. Occasionally when we need parts, they need to be shipped, but it's not a regular delivery. So because of this, D&I couldn't assign a percentage. However, D&I has provided a list of MARTA, DBE qualified shippers, and Simmons has committed to use them. Next page, please. At this time, I am requesting that the committee recommend to the full MARTA board this procurement of rail car maintenance, wheel truing machines, maintenance and repair services, RFP 45253 with Simmons Machine Tool Corporation in the amount of $233,490. Thank you.
This is Hardage. I move to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Hardage. Is there a second?
Second, Stacey Blakely.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this topic? Any discussion, any questions? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and call for the vote. Are there any abstentions? Are there any no votes? The motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a resolution authorizing award of a contract for the procurement of ultra-low sulfur clear diesel fuel and unleaded gasoline with 10% ethanol, IFB B47088. Mr. William Taylor, Director of Bus Maintenance.
Well, good morning, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Parker, Mr. Greenwood, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. May I direct your attention to the agenda item requesting a resolution authorizing award of a contract for the procurement of ultra-low sulfur clear diesel fuel and unleaded gasoline blended with 10% ethanol, contract number B47088. Next slide, please. Today we will present why we need a fuel contract. Second, previous and current fuel contracts. Third, we'll present procurement considerations, followed by contractor selected. And finally, we'll request to approve the resolution. Next slide, please. Well, we have why do we need fuel? Well, this gives us an opportunity to fix pricing, or in this particular case, we will fix the discount rates for fuel pricing. We have 1,200 plus vehicles that are used to provide service or support our transit agency. As a matter of fact, in FY20, we traveled 50 million miles, well, over 50 million miles utilizing MARTA vehicles. Simply put, it takes a lot of vehicles and fuel to provide transit services to our ridership. Next slide, please. This slide tells the rest of the story. I'm explaining the volume of fuel MARTA consumes. Again, in FY20, we used over 4 million gallons of diesel and unleaded fuel to provide transit services for this region. Next slide, please. Our previous fuel contractor was James Rivers Petroleum. After experiencing issues with James Rivers, we worked with our legal services department to terminate the contract. But while in the process of completing that, we added a supplemental fuel contract as a contingency plan to maintain continuity of service in case we had any lapse in fuel delivery. Next slide, please. Our current contractor is Boswell Oil Company. They have been very supportive, providing fuel supplies for MARTA, especially during the fuel crisis that occurred in May of this year. From the very beginning, they have been very, very responsive for us. Next slide, please. I am pleased to say that this is a very competitive contract. This recurring contract received 8 bids, and we did achieve our 15% DBE goal, which is consistent for a contract of this type. Next slide, please. Gutman Oil Company provided the highest discount rates for both line items for diesel and unleaded fuel. Next slide. At this time, I am requesting that the committee recommend to the full MARTA board this resolution authorizing the contract for procurement of ultra-low sulfur clear diesel fuel and unleaded gasoline blended with 10% ethanol, contract number B47088, in the amount of $40,809,726. Ms. Abdul Salam, I respectfully return the matter to you and the committee for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Can I get a motion to approve this resolution?
Al Pond, move for approval.
Hartage seconds.
Thank you both. Is there discussion on this topic? Any questions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approval of the resolution? No, do it the other way. Are there any abstentions? Are there any no votes? Then the resolution is carried. Thank you. Next we will have a briefing on Confined Space Program by Leslie Hubble.
Good morning, Chairman Worthy, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Parker, Mr. Greenwood, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. May I direct your attention to the agenda item, which is a briefing on the Confined Space Program. My name is Leslie Hubble, Manager of Environmental Health and Safety for the Division of Safety and Quality Assurance. In today's presentation, I will highlight 3 components of this program. Next slide. Before I discuss the program, I'd like to give you some information about why confined space safety is so critical. Confined spaces are enclosed spaces with restricted entry and exit. They often have hazardous conditions such as low oxygen, toxic gases, and materials that can engulf the worker. According to the U.S. Department of Labor's Bureau of Labor Statistics, 148 workers died in 2018 from occupational injuries involving a confined space. To tell you one story, in February of 2020, Great Lakes Tank and Vessel lost 2 workers to asphyxiation. A female worker entered an empty tank to clean it and was overcome by an oxygen-deficient atmosphere. A second employee attempted a rescue without investigating why the first worker had become unconscious. He also lost his life. When OSHA conducted their investigation, they found 46 violations and assessed a fine of $1.57 million. Next slide, please. Overall, MARTA's Confined Space Program helps to ensure that we comply with confined space requirements outlined by OSHA. More importantly, the program's in place to mitigate hazards to our employees and contractors associated with confined spaces, along with identifying those spaces and associated hazards. My presentation will focus on 3 key areas of this program. First, training. Second, the confined space assessment process. And third, providing an overview of our Arcgis database. Next slide, please. So let's start with the discussion of our training programs. Confined space training is an essential part of ensuring that MARTA employees are fully aware of the hazards associated with confined spaces and how to properly mitigate those hazards during entry. There are 3 levels of training: awareness, entrant and attendant, and rescue. The Confined Space Awareness course has recently been converted to an e-learning module and is available on MARTA Learn. The course presents an overview of confined spaces and how to identify them, the difference between a permit required and non-permit required confined space, hazards associated with those spaces, and the roles and responsibilities of each of the confined space personnel. Personnel that are required to actually enter a confined space or serve as the attendant or supervisor for the entry are required to attend a full day confined space entrant and attendant training. In fiscal year 21, EHS has provided this training for 131 employees. Finally, a very limited number of personnel at MARTA are trained to provide rescue operations in the event of a confined space emergency. Those select personnel in facilities and police receive a week-long training through a vendor that specializes in confined space rescue. Next slide, please. Next, I'll discuss the second part of the program, which is the assessment process. So back in 2018, Environmental Health and Safety started working with our contractor, Apex, to conduct assessments of MARTA's confined spaces. We started the assessment program at the bus and rail maintenance facilities using standard field data collection methods and created maps using aerial photographs. We quickly realized that this was not the most efficient way to collect this data and would limit its use and availability to those we were collecting it for. So in 2019, we transitioned to using GPS coordinates and iPads to electronically collect all of the data and feed that into an Arcgis database. To date, we've completed 2,250 assessments with over 1,600 of those in the Arcgis database. During the assessment, each space is labeled with a unique identifier, and attributes of each space, including photographs, are collected. Next slide, please. These photos are of two members of the Apex team conducting the assessments. Lids are pulled and all of the attributes of the space are collected. These include the type of space, whether it be a storm sewer, electrical vault, tank, manhole, the means of entry, access into the space, basic dimensions of that space, and then we take atmospheric readings in each of them to include oxygen levels, explosive limits, carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and other toxic gases. We also record any physical or biological hazards that exist in the space. Next slide, please. Lids of the confined spaces are engraved with the unique identifier for that space. We chose engraving because labels on the outside of spaces tend to get damaged from weather and traffic. We also post danger confined space signs, as you can see in the right photograph, inside the confined spaces with the same unique identifier. We use those signs as well when entrances aren't affected by weather or traffic. Next slide. Finally, I'll cover the Arcgis database where all of the assessment information is collected. To the right is a snapshot of our dashboard that shows the 1,603 spaces broken down by type of space. We've completed assessments and GIS database entry for all of our rail stations and their surrounding properties that are owned by MARTA. The data will be used by departments across the authority to better prepare for entries, develop hazard mitigation strategies, and prepare for emergencies. The data can also be used for project planning, construction, and engineering purposes. Next slide, please. So this is a view of the GIS data for North Springs. If you look at the photograph on the left, you'll see blue dots that represent each of the confined spaces that have been identified at North Springs Station and the surrounding properties. When you click on any one of the blue dots, you get a table of attributes for that confined space and have the option to open photos, as you can see in the table in the photograph on the right. I've just selected one of the storm sewer manholes to show you an example of the characteristics of that space and a sample photo. We take 3 photos of each space so that people can know that they're actually in the right spot. The map view can be customized for the user. For example, electrical power and equipment could select a view that only shows them electrical manholes and vaults. Next slide, please. This is an attribute table that provides just a different view of the data that's collected by the system. The table is much bigger than what can be shown on the screen, but it shows you how, with using these different selection boxes at the left, people can customize their view. Next slide. Now that you've heard about our training programs, assessments, and the GIS database, I wanted to wrap up to tell you where we're headed. Starting in fiscal year 22, we will transition the Arcgis database that's with our contractor at the moment to be housed at MARTA. We will also start assessments along the wayside, and then that process will geolocate the wayside exit gates to ensure police, safety, and others are better able to respond to emergencies and evacuations on the wayside. To finish the initial assessments, we'll go back to the bus and rail maintenance facilities to migrate all of that data into the database. Our focus on employee training, combined with thorough data on all of our confined spaces, is helping us take a proactive approach to preventing injuries and fatalities that are all too common in confined spaces. Next slide. Thank you for your time and continued support.
Thank you, Ms. Hubble. Excuse me. Thank you for the briefing. I did have one question about how long does it take for your training for the staff?
The entrant and attendant training is 8 hours. The e-learning module is about 30 minutes long.
Thank you. Does anyone else have questions or comments for Ms. Hubble?
Yes, yeah, Ms. Roberto, this is Rod Frierson have a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yes. How do you handle when there's additional confined space that's added to the surrounding areas? How is that updated? How's your database updated?
So we sit on all of the project teams as safety and environmental support with CIP and with operations. So if we add a confined space, then we would go back and do the same assessment process that we do currently for existing spaces.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have questions or comment for Ms. Hubble? Hearing none, that concludes our agenda for Operations and Safety Management Committee. We will turn the floor over to the Business Committee. Mr. Frierson.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call the Business Management Committee to order. Mrs. Huff, can you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Roberta Abdul Salam.
Present.
Robbie Ash. Stacy Blakely. Jim Durrett. William Floyd.
I'm still here.
Roderick Frierson.
Present.
Ryan Glover. Frida Hardage. Russell McMurray. Al Pond.
Present.
Catherine Powers. Rita Scott.
Present.
Reginald Snyder. Christopher Tomlinson.
Present.
Thomas Worthy. That's 6 board members present.
Thank you, Ms. Huff. The first item on the agenda is approval of May 27th, 2021 Business Management Committee meeting minutes. Approval.
Pond, so moved.
Either way.
Pardon me, is that Mr. Pond? He's approved, and I
Correct.
got a second. Mr. Pond approved, second. And
Roberta.
Okay, this a second. Okay, it's been properly moved in a second. Do we have any abstentions to the meeting minutes? Any objections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes have been approved. The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the award of the procurement of leave of management services, RFP P47301. LaShondra Dawkins, AGM Human Resources. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman Frierson. Good morning, Chairman Frierson, Business Management Committee members, Mr. Shernath, and Mr. Parker. I'm pleased to be before you today to request your recommendation to the Board of Directors to approve the resolution authorizing the award of a contract for leave management services, RFP P47301. These services are the services that we provide to manage our Family Medical Leave Act leave, sick leave, and our short-term disability programs. Next slide. This contract has a 5-year term consisting of a 3-year base and 2 one-year options for a total of $2,096,688 funded with local operating funds. This is a recurring contract, and the contract includes a 10% DBE goal. Next slide. By way of background, on February 17, 2021, notice to proponents were sent to 11 potential vendors for the procurement of leave management services. Additionally, notice of request for proposals was advertised on March 1st and March 8th in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Georgia Procurement Registry, the Georgia Local Government Access Marketplace, and on MARTA's website. 127 firms retrieved the online solicitation and or purchased the CD. However, on the proposal deadline date of March 18, 2021, only 2 proposals were received. Our contracts and procurement team has a system in place where they will do surveys to determine the nature of the non-response to RFPs when we see such a variance. And the majority of the respondents indicated that they were unable to perform the work required by the scope of work in the RFP. We did have a number of individuals who did not respond to the survey, about 23 of those. And then we did have a small group that indicated that they did not have enough time to pull a team together. However, we did move forward with the standard time that we give proponents to respond to our RFPs. Next slide. Both of the respondents that submitted RFP proposals were deemed responsive and shared with the Source Evaluation Committee on April 1st, 2021. They are Regional Management Services, LLC, and UPMC Benefit Management Services, Incorporated, doing business as work partners. The Source Evaluation Committee reviewed and evaluated the proposals based on the established criteria. After the Source Evaluation Committee's initial review and evaluation, Work Partners was determined to have the highest overall score and to be in the competitive range with a score of 85.74 in comparison to 54.43, which was the score for Regional Management Services, LLC. The committee submitted clarifying questions to Work Partners and invited the vendor to submit a best and final offer. Next slide. Consistent with the MARTA Act, the Source Evaluation Committee unanimously recommends that it's in the best interest of the authority to enter into a contract with Work Partners for leave management services. They were founded in 1995 as a subsidiary of the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Their transportation clients represent 11% of their absence management book of business, to include MBTA in Boston, SEPTA in Philadelphia, New York Transit, and Metro North. And they are our current incumbent vendor. Next slide. As I indicated at the open, the DBE goal was 10%. And at the time of the recommendation, the Source Evaluation Committee was advised that the vendor had met that goal. However, as they began to provide final documentation, Work Partners' DBE participation commitment ended up turning to be low due to the limited areas of opportunities for DBEs under the defined statement of work and the limited number of DBEs on Georgia's DBE directory in those pertinent areas where opportunities were available. Work Partners took a number of steps to seek DBE firms so that they could be in full compliance with our 10% goal. Under their normal process, they had their SMEs analyze the statement of work, and the analysis came up with 2 specific areas: printing and fulfillment, and physicals for FMLA and the short-term disability program. After reviewing the Georgia database for firms to conduct physicals, it was determined that there was a limited offering geared mainly towards drug and alcohol testing and workers' compensation. And those firms did not have the capacity to conduct the type of physicals required by MARTA and work partners for this particular procurement. Although conducting physicals was eliminated as an opportunity for DBE participation, work partners did determine that they could use a firm for scheduling of these physicals. So printing and scheduling of physicals, although a small segment, will be the manner in which they meet the DBE goal. However, they're not at the point based on the firms available to reach the 10%. Work Partners has indicated they're open to look at other suggestions that MARTA may have as the time evolves over the term of the contract. But based upon the information that I just shared, our diversity and inclusion unit has deemed that Work Partners has exerted sufficient documented good faith efforts to be successful. That's we recommend it to this board. Additional considerations by our diversity inclusion partners was that UPMC, the parent company, has a corporate supplier diversity program, which has demonstrated over $1 billion in diverse procurement spend over the past 10 years. And UPMC's insurance service division, which Work Partners is a part of, provides procurement opportunities to over 100 MBE, WBE, and DBE certified suppliers. The aggregate commitment amount for this division was $30 million in 2020. Next slide. As the selected vendor, Work Partners will continue to support the day-to-day administration of MARTA's integrated leave of absence program, align with FMLA best practices, provide disability management for the short-term disability program, assist MARTA in reducing overall costs associated with leave of absences, and improve employee availability. The program is ready to shift and have greater emphasis on program management, and Work Partners has already begun to activate some new proprietary program management tools to enhance our services. Next slide. So in closing, I want to restate our request that the Business Management Committee recommend to the Board of Directors approval of the resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of leave management services, RFP P47301 to Work Partners. Thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, thank you, Ms. Thank you, Ms. Dawson. Can I get a motion and second?
This is Hardage. I move. I was waiting to see if anybody, but I can move.
Okay.
Roberta, I'll second.
All right, any discussions?
I have a question, Mr.
Any
Chairman.
questions? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Abdul.
Ms. Dawkins, thank you for bringing the information to us. On that very last slide, you showed FMLA and various other types of leave. Who handles your workers' compensation?
Thank you for the question, Ms. Roberta Abdul Salam. I'm going to allow Ms. O'Neill to speak to that because that is handled through the legal department.
Okay.
Good morning. This is Liz. It is in our risk management department. They handle the workers' comp claims and time with the assistance of a third-party provider also.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
Mr. Bryson, I just have a quick question to make sure I understood this part of the presentation.
Go ahead, Ms. Scott. Go ahead.
The DBE goal was 10%. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct, Chairman Scott.
And the company put forth the good faith effort, but still did not meet that goal?
That is correct. At this time, based upon the information that we have in the attempt to do the printing and fulfillment, as well as the scheduling of physicals, based on the firms available in this DBE area, they will not meet the 10%. However, my understanding is in partnering with our diversity inclusion office, we will continue to monitor this, and if there are other opportunities for DBE participation over the course of the term of the contract, we will make those necessary adjustments. because in their original proposal, they had presented companies to meet the 10% DB goal. So they are committed to meeting the goal. But at this time, we don't have information to suggest at this date that they will.
Sunset on the opportunity for them to meet the goal?
Ms. Nash, are you available to give further clarification to Board Member Scott?
Ms. Nash, are you available? Maybe she's on mute. I don't see Ms. Nash on the call at this moment.
Can you hear me?
There you go. Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Nash. All right. Did you you hear the comment from Ms. Dawkins concerning this DPE goal? Hello, Ms. Nash.
I think we lost her. I will try to answer while we see if she can join. Board Member Scott, my understanding is that D&I have determined that they have met, they did not meet the goal, but they have demonstrated sufficient good faith effort. So we can move forward with a contract with them. And they will continue to monitor them over the term of that contract for DBE participation. And if opportunities evolve over the term of the contract, we will ensure that they add those opportunities in so that we can do as much as we can to get to that 10%.
Right, I understood that part. I just wanted to know if, say for instance, what is the length of the proposed contract?
5 years. It's a 3-year base with 2 one-year options.
Okay, so say for instance, at 4.5 years, they still have not met the goal. My question was, are we continuously monitoring? I understood the part that we're monitoring the goal, but have we given them a sunset?
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry, this is Paula Nash.
Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Nash. Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Nash.
I'm sorry, I dropped off. Something was happening with my microphone. Yes, I'd like to answer that question. So the one thing I want to make clear that everybody understands, the DBE goal is in fact a goal. So what the FTA allows an agency to do is give good faith efforts consideration if the company has in fact attempted to meet that goal, and due to a lack of DBEs in a particular area or something along those means, they are not able to meet the goal. And what that means is that though we will monitor, because this company has said if something comes up, if there's a way that we can increase that goal, we will in fact do it, and they have made that commitment. But being given good faith efforts considerations means that we're not going to actually hold them to that 10%, because we have considered that they have done what they can do to meet the goal, and what they've come up with is approximately 2% instead of the 10%. Again, if other things come along, then we will point those out to them, and they will do their best to incorporate more of the percentage. But being given good faith considerations, the most that they have said that it looks like they will be able to meet is in fact 2% right now.
Again, my question is, I understand they have provided a good faith effort, and based upon what you're saying, they're at 2%, but there is no incentive or requirement for them to ever meet the 10% goal. Is that, I guess that's
correct. That is correct. There's no requirement for them to meet the 10% goal when they have shown good faith efforts.
Okay. Thanks for the answer.
Ms. Scott, although it is, I just want to be clear about what Paula was conveying, is that it is the responsibility of her department to not just stop once we've established that we can award a contract where they've performed, good faith effort to put together a plan to meet the goal. Her efforts don't stop there. Her staff will do monitoring and, over time have a discussion about other opportunities to get additional scope of work to DBE firms. So the process doesn't end there. The point that Ms. Nash is making is that the good faith effort is not going to prevent us from awarding this contract. The FTA program doesn't allow us to do that. We need to establish that a firm has made a good faith effort, and then we will continue to work with that firm to increase the DBE participation along the way. That fair, Paula?
That is, yes, that is correct.
Right, I understand. I just wanted to clarify, for instance, if I say I tried to meet that goal, but I can't, that's my good faith effort, and then I never meet the goal, I never attempt to meet the goal because I've said I put forth a good faith effort. I wanted to understand specifically that the company understands that they are still required to evolve.
Yes, ma'am. They are required to continue to attempt to meet that goal. What happens is they don't get penalized if, say, for instance, so the reason they're not meeting the goal right now is that there just aren't enough DBEs in that area on our directory. If that continues, then they probably will never meet the 10% goal. But we will continue to work with them to try to find other areas that they may be able to meet the goal. But there is a chance, particularly since there's such a gap between the goal and where they are, that there may not ever be enough DBEs that make it onto the directory that they'll reach 10%. But their job is, and our monitoring is for them to always try to evolve, to try to get as high as possible.
And we will be monitoring that, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. And let me add, and we're gonna come back to the board with some more details about this, but some time ago we had talked about establishing, and we're less than a month away from kicking this off, the Diversity Matters program. And so I think this is, a key component around making sure that there's an alignment between our recognition, our policy, whatever you want to call it. We as an organization have a commitment and a philosophy around DBE participation. We can't just automatically assume just because you win a contract at MARTA that you understand that, that philosophy that we have, where it's important. And Paula's group is about to kick off, a program where we will be, creating an alignment session around our philosophy and the importance of diversity and DBE goals, and why that's important to this organization, and why it's, a historical piece of our organization. So we can, we will share once we have that first kickoff meeting and roll out that program. We're going to bring back some information to the board about how it's not just setting a goal, making sure that our contractors are performing a good faith effort, but we're also working now to build an alignment between what's important to us and get our our partners to understand and align with what's important to us, not just through administering a goal. So.
Thank you for that further explanation. I just wanted to make sure that there was a process or something in place that we make sure that there is continued efforts to evolve to meet the specific goals. And you don't have an opportunity to say, well, we put forth an effort, it didn't happen, and that's it. So,
right.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Scott. Are there any other questions from the board? Any other comments?
Chair
Yes.
Farson, this is Timothy Blakely.
Yes, Ms. Blakely.
I second Chair Scott's sentiments, and I was just going to say, because at the beginning of the presentation, it sounded as if the company committed to meeting DBE goals, and then they weren't able to do so. They weren't able to meet their, what they promised us that they would do. And so I think that it comes, back to Jeff's point, accountability, making sure that, as an organization, if we are saying that we are supportive of diversity and inclusion efforts, that we actually are doing that not only in word, but in deed. And being on the forefront of that as an organization, I think, is important as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I did want to add in, I know that the company committed to meeting it in the beginning, and I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood. Initially, they had subcontractors listed that weren't DBEs. They were minority subcontractors. They just weren't DBEs. So we couldn't count them towards meeting the goal, but they were definitely looking at minority businesses.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments from the board members? Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question concerning the resolution. Are there any objections to the resolution? Are there any abstentions to the resolution? Hearing none, the resolution has carried. Thank you very much, Mrs. Dawkins.
Thank you, Chairman Frierson and Business Management Committee.
The next item that's on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of the Splunk Enterprise Security Subscription Maintenance Support, IFB B48255. Dean Mollis, AGM, Information Security. You have the floor.
Good morning, Chairman Frierson, Business Management Committee members, Mr. Srinath, Mr. Parker. May I direct your attention to agenda item number 3. My name is Dean Mallis. I'm the AGM of Information Security. I'm pleased to be before you today to request your recommendation to the Board of Directors to approve the resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of Splunk Enterprise Security Subscription Maintenance Support, IFB B48255 with Zones LLC. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of words on the screen. Splunk, basically, it's a log aggregator. So it takes in all of our data from our switches, our routers, our applications, and it correlates all that data into threat detection. So it looks for anomalous behavior, and our analysts look at that data to see if anything weird has happened on the MARTA network. Part of the compliance requirement, too, is to keep log data. It's also a best practice to keep it for about a year to 13 months so that you can go back and do some more investigation. It allows the team to then do deep dives when we see alerts on the network. It does dashboarding so that we can kind of get a look at what we're doing from a cyber perspective in terms of what kind of incidents are happening on the network. Next slide, please. So the Department of Information Security is seeking approval for this multi-year contract for Splunk. Again, it's Splunk licensings that are sold through a value-added reseller or a VAR. So software licenses, they provide the rights to use that software. We can't buy directly through Splunk. Splunk is actually the name of the company. So they sell it through resellers. So on March 4th, 2021, advance notice to bidders were sent to 4 resellers. Notice of the invitation for the bids were advertised in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Georgia Procurement Registry, the Georgia Local Government Access Marketplace, and on MARTA's website. 39 firms retrieved the online solicitation. On a bid opening date, 1 bid was received. We had 39 firms that downloaded the bid. 5 of the firms were unable to perform the work. 3 firms did not have enough time to submit. 3 firms were unable to submit competitive pricing. We had 1 firm submit, but they submitted late. And we had another firm submit via email, which did not meet the requirements of mailing it in. So Zone was the firm that submitted on time and with the proper requirements, and they were responsive and responsible. So the Department of Information Security is recommending that Zones LLC be awarded the contract. The contract will be funded from 100% from the FY22 operational budget. So at this time, I'm respectfully request that the Business Management Committee recommend to the full board the award of the contract for the procurement of Splunk Enterprise Security Subscription Maintenance Support, IFB B48255 with Zones LLC.
Thank you, Mr. Malice. Appreciate that very. Okay, thank you very much. Before we go on any questions, may I get a motion?
So moved. Roberta.
Okay,
Hardy,
in the second. Okay, it's been properly. Thank you. It's been properly moved in second. Discussion by the board member. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question, Al Pond.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Malice. Listing this as 1 bid proposal, how did that number work with the budget estimate that our in-house people reviewed? I assume you had a budget estimate up front before you made this recommendation. So
yeah, internal audit reviewed, and it was deemed to be a fair pricing and in the estimate. So this is really we've had this software before, so we're going into a contract. It was a year-to-year renewal, and it fits in line with what we've estimated for FY22.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, go right ahead.
Yes, Mr. Malice, in looking at your information on the chart, it said that it would detect, the software would detect, I guess, in any kind of a breach or something. Will it do anything to prevent any breaches?
It does not. This is purely a detective measure. We do have preventative software, and in the process of evaluating some new preventative software that we're most likely will procure. But this kind of takes in data from some of those devices that you can't put preventative controls around. So our switches, our routers, there's really not much you can do that can block certain things. And it really looks for, again, anomalous behavior. It's not so much malwares and stuff, but it looks for data moving across a network that shouldn't be moving, data that goes to places that it should not be going, machines that should not be talking to each other. So not to get too technical, but like my laptop should not be talking to Mr. Parker's laptop. That's not the way the network should function. So it looks for that data and kind of correlates it. It takes data such as if I were to log in right now and then there was another login 45 seconds, a minute later, an hour later from another country, it says, well, that's not possible to go from, Atlanta to another country, and it alerts on that type of data.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, any other questions from the board members concerning it? This resolution from Mr. Malice. Okay, hearing none, I'll call the question. All those who abstain from the resolution? Are there any objections to the resolution? Okay, hearing none, the resolution carries. Thank you, Mr. Malice.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the award of the procurement of property and casualty insurance brokerage services. RFP 48464. Donna Jenkins, Director of Risk Management. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Frierson. Good morning, Chairman Frierson, Mr. Durrett, Mr. Parker, Mr. Srinath, and members of the committee. In March, I requested the committee's approval to solicit a contract for property and casualty insurance brokerage services. I'm here today to complete the process and move forward with finalizing the award of the contract. In my presentation, resolution authorizing the award of a contract for property and casualty insurance brokerage services, I will provide you with a brief overview of the results of our review process and high-level information about the recommended awardee. My presentation today will cover two key areas. First, I will take you through a high-level summary of the results of our request for proposal process and key points of the contract. Second, I will provide you with information about the recommended awardee. Finally, at the conclusion of my presentation, I will ask for the committee's approval of the resolution to award the contract. Before I get into my presentation, there is one item I want to touch on. As you may recall, when I was before you in March, I advised the committee that there may not be a DBE goal assigned to this contract due to the limited number of national insurance brokerage firms that have the global insurance market presence to place the specialized coverage required for our operations. Ultimately, this was the case, as after the Office of Diversity and Inclusion conducted their review, there was no DBE participation goal assigned to this contract. Next slide, please. So moving on to the results of the RFP process and key contract points. This is a recurring contract with a 5-year term. It's structured with 2 base years and 3 one-year options. The total cost of the 5-year contract is $360,000 and will be paid from local operating funds. Next slide, please. On April 28th, 2 advance notices were sent to potential proponents. The contract was advertised on the dates noted in the timeline. On May 27th, 4 proposals were received by Contracts and Procurement, all of which were deemed responsive and then distributed to the Source Evaluation Committee for review on June 2nd, 2021. Next slide, please. The 4 proponents were Marsh USA, Aon Insurance Services, Alliant, and McGriff Insurance Services. The SEC met again on June 7th to review the technical scores and combined scores, including pricing. Based on the results of this review, the SEC voted to award the contract to the proponent with the highest combined score, Marsh USA. As we discussed earlier, there are a limited number of national brokerage firms that have the global insurance market presence to place the coverage required for our operations. This was borne out by the small number of responses received, and further by the results wherein the 2 largest national brokerage firms, Marsh and Aon, were the number 1 and number 2 vendors respectively in the scoring by the SEC. Next slide, please. On to the recommended awardee, Marsh USA. Marsh places $50 billion in insurance premiums worldwide, $1 billion in transportation premiums, and $500 million in rail-specific premiums. Marsh has the market leverage with all the insurance carriers necessary to meet all the authorities' property and casualty insurance needs. Our cost for the next 5 years is 4% lower than the expiring contract, which is a savings of $15,000, and Marsh is the incumbent vendor. Next slide, please. Finally, this slide provides an overview of the services we require from our insurance broker of record. I won't read through those and just let y'all take a look at that for a minute. So let's move on to wrap things up. Recall that we began our discussion about insurance brokerage services and why the authority needs a broker in March. In my presentation, resolution authorizing award of a contract for property and casualty insurance brokerage services, I focused on 2 key areas that bring the RFP process full circle. First, we discussed the results of the proposal process and key points of the contract. Second, we reviewed information about the recommended awardee and a recap of services to be provided. Next slide, please. Now I respectfully request the committee's approval of this resolution to award a contract to Marsh USA for property and casualty insurance brokerage services. And thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you.
So may I have a motion in a second? We do discussion.
Al Pond, so moved.
Arctic seconds.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Our discussion. Any questions from the board? Any comments? Okay, hearing none, I will call the resolution. All those who abstain from the resolution? Hearing none, are there any objections to the resolution? Hearing none, the resolution has carried. Thank you very much, Mrs. Jennings.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing a 3-year extension of the AirLink Mobility Manager Maintenance and Support, LOA L44248. Talbert, AGM Technology, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Frierson, members of the committee, Mr. Parker, Mr. Srinath. This morning, I would like to request an approval of a resolution, if you can skip to the next slide, please. Authorizing an extension of contract with Sierra Wireless for the Air Mobility Manager Maintenance and Support contract. This is an extension of a 3-year period of time for an amount of $625,248. This system that we're looking to extend support for the next 3 years is the equipment that we use on board our buses, rail cars, mobility vans, police vehicles, and street cars to provide Wi-Fi. This is both for public-facing Wi-Fi as well as internal connectivity that we use to access security cameras, fare collection, passenger counters, and that like. This contract will give us continued maintenance and support on the existing equipment in these vehicles for the next 3 years. This concludes, can you go to the next slide? Sorry. Here are the financial pieces of information on it. The extension of 3 years, it's paid for out of 100% operating funds budget for the next 3 years, and the financial totals. This concludes my request for extension of this contract.
Okay, before we go into discussion, can I get a motion in a second?
This is Hardage. I move to approve.
Alpine, second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. All right, any discussion? Any comments from the board concerning the resolution? Okay. All right, hearing none. Are there any abstentions to the resolution? Are there any objections to the resolution? Hearing none, the resolution has carried. Mr. Talbert, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is a briefing, a technology updates. Mr. Talbert, you have the floor again.
Thank you. Keyword here being brief.
Kirk, your audio is a little bit low. If you could just speak up for us, I'd appreciate that. Thanks.
Sorry, hopefully you can hear me fine. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, that's better.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, good. So this is a brief summary of what we've been up to in the technology organization since the last time we spoke, which was right at the beginning of the pandemic, about a year ago. If you can promote to the next slide, please. This is an organizational overview of our department. I know we've had a few new board members that have joined us since our last briefing, and I won't go into a lot of details, but we are split up into primarily 4 different areas where we support the applications and the software that you interact with on a daily basis, the infrastructure, the hardware, the technology that you can touch, our implementation team, which is where we stand up new projects, we implement new automation, driving a lot of the projects that we'll be discussing here. And then finally, our strategy and innovation group, which is a new part of the organization that we stood up to help us better design solutions and help figure out where we can get the most bang for MARTA's buck as we look at automating and improving business processes throughout the organization. Next slide, please. From an operational standpoint, we are performing pretty well given what's happened over the past year. We're operating within our operating and capital budgets are favorable at this point in time, and we've been continuing continuing to reduce the cost of delivering our operational services. The service performance, we're continuing to work on improving how we deliver technology. Hopefully some of you had the opportunity to interact with our tech bar. That was a recent development where we try to make it as customer friendly as possible to get your technology both delivered and back on track when it goes off the rails. From a project performance standpoint, we are working the portfolio of projects. There's a number that we won't talk about here today, but there's also the large publicly facing ones that you'll be familiar with. We'll discuss. Working pretty well. And from an innovation standpoint, one of the things that we measure is how are we improving the state of MARTA's business operations? Are we bringing technology that helps to make things easier, or are we simply accepting the status quo? That group we stood up, and they're going through the process of documenting and identifying all the latent opportunities that are scattered throughout MARTA, which is a pretty Herculean task, but the goal then is to take those, prioritize those, and work through the capital budgeting process so that we can make sure that we're delivering on the most important improvements possible. Next slide, please. If there are any questions, please stop me. Otherwise, I can take them at the end as well. From a strategic initiative standpoint, I'd like to talk first about those internal projects that we're working on. These are projects that, significant in nature, don't typically get a lot of light because they aren't directly visible to our riders or to the public stakeholders. We have a number of projects that we work every year internally to make sure that we maintain a good state of repair. That means we are constantly looking at our core storage, where we store all that CCTV, where we store all the information, the documents that get produced. And not surprisingly, like any organization, that demand continues to grow. We're making more digital files, not less, over time. So we're constantly taking a look at that and staying on top of core storage. We've been working on deployment of a redundant fiber network and data center. We continue that. That's a multi-year process. And if you remember, for those that have been around for a while, that was a MARTA finding about the importance of having a resilient infrastructure. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that resilience tends to be overlooked until it's suddenly needed. And these types of projects need a lot of attention before they become critical. So we're continuing to expand our network in terms of redundancy, meaning that we have multiple paths to get to the important data, so if anything happens to one of those paths, we still have the ability to continue operations. And finally, from a systems upgrade standpoint, we've been working diligently behind the scenes to deploy operational business intelligence dashboards. We call them Power BI. That's the tool that we use, and you can see a picture down here at the bottom of the types of metrics, for example, that we're tracking within IT, but we're working with all the departments throughout MARTA to make sure that we have as fresh and as accurate, detailed information as possible to help in the decision planning process. From a business process enhancement standpoint, a lot of this takes place in Oracle. We completed our encumbrance initiative back in July 1, so at the beginning of this fiscal year. And one of the great things that led to was the ability to automate the federal reporting. There's significant federal reporting in terms of how we're doing from a budget standpoint that I'm sure Raj can go into great detail if there's interest. But turning on that capability that Oracle allowed us to produce those reports automatically. And we're looking forward to standing up contract automation in the fourth quarter of this year so that we can assist the contracts and procurement department in tracking all these contracts that you hear about on a regular basis. Finally, we've implemented direct pay automation. This was another audit finding. It was taking a manual paper process for direct pays internally and making sure that it was automated and completed training on that. Next slide, please. This is where we report on the projects that you've probably seen and you'll probably hear about from our constituents. The customer-facing initiatives, I'm pleased to say we've made some significant progress in this past year. We are currently in the middle of an RFP for the new CAT-AVL system, which, for those that aren't into alphabet jargon, is our computer-aided dispatch and automatic vehicle location system. As I describe it to people, it's the system that tells us where the buses should be and where they actually are. Facilitates communication between the buses, bus dispatch and operations, and it's also what we use to inform the customers where our buses are at in real time. So this process, we're anticipating awarding a contract in the next few months. I think we've got about 30 to 60 days before final proposals are due. We'll be awarding contract probably late summer, and then we'll begin the arduous task of rolling this out to the entire fleet. This will be a significant improvement, as some of you will remember the current system we've had is quite dated. Currently, it provides bus location about once every 2 minutes. So if anyone's used the mobile application, you'll see that it's not frequently updated. There's a lot of technical reasons I won't go into that cause that, but one of the things we've been working on behind the scenes, knowing that the CAT-AVL project will take a while to roll out, is coming up with a way to improve that vehicle location. We're working on a technology that will be able to deploy in advance of the new CAT-AVL system, which should reduce or increase the frequency significantly down to every few seconds, being able to find the location of the bus. From a regional technologies perspective, we've been working with the ATL and the other carriers in the region to develop a regional mobility app. The key here is we're anticipating when this is available here third quarter, so the next few months, we will be able to utilize it to replace our legacy MARTA on the Go app. This is a more robust application that we've been developing with consultants for the past year, and it has a number of more modern and advanced features than what we currently have. We're currently testing it. It's a very positive system. It's actually in use in a few other locations around the U.S., and from a support and development standpoint, this is open source software, which allows any development to be done in other transit agencies to benefit MARTA as well. So we're excited by that and look forward to talking soon about that rollout. We've been working on data quality as well. We're in the process, and we should be completing here in July, so next month, a rollout of an improved data format. And I won't get too jargony for you. It's called the Gtfs Format, if you're familiar with it. But it's the format that tells the world where our buses should be and where they're at. Again, it's kind of an extension of the CAT-AVL system, but it's in a standard format that any application could pick up. So you'll see companies like Transit or Move It that utilize this format that count on us producing it and broadcasting it out so that they can update their software. This really extends the reach of MARTA's information out to make it universal and easily accessible by everyone, which is a good thing. We're also been working with some vendors behind the scenes, given the situation with COVID, to research how we might be able to better share bus crowding information. So we've seen some agencies that are looking at communicating on a regular basis how full are the buses. So it's not an easy problem to solve technically, but we've been working through that and look forward to some developments in that area in the near future. And finally, Avis, I'm not going to go into a full slide on it, but Avis, as you're aware, is the system that displays our train arrivals at rail stations. You see a picture of it here on the right-hand side. It's gone through a significant implementation process. We're in the final stages of testing it, so that we'll have sign-off with the vendor, but you'll see the fruits of it already at the rail stations, both in terms of we're now displaying rail information in terms of train arrivals, but we have bus information, we have elevator status, escalator status, important alerts, and status updates. The content we're working on right now, getting some of the last little data pieces fixed, but we should have the system accepted here in the next few months. Next slide, please. So one last project I want to discuss, and then we'll conclude, is the mobile ticketing project, or Breeze Mobile as it's called. We are fully live. During this past year, we went live with the application in, I believe, well, it was the fall. I think it was September when it hit the application stores. We have fully implemented all full fare types, bus and rail, and we look forward to, in the next few months, doing a full marketing campaign, and I'll discuss that in a second here. We're beginning the process of deploying paratransit fare types as well, and hope to be fully deployed for that in Q4. The system is fully operational on the vehicles. It's just a process of rolling it out to the public so that make it intuitive and make it easy to utilize. We continue, because this is a new platform, we continue to explore the opportunity for single-use promotional integrated payments, meaning if you're using a third-party app, making it easier to purchase and show a MARTA pass via that third-party app. So those sorts of things are now possible because we have a digital ticketing system in place. We've been working with the regional partners as well, Cobb and Gwinnett, about how we would implement digital passes for them. And then, of course, we are working on a strategy that as the AFC 2.0 project and solution is selected, which will ultimately replace the Breeze mobile technology that we have now, making it a smooth and seamless transition, right? So we're taking the Breeze card and the Breeze mobile systems and transitioning them over to whatever the new fare collection system is in a way that will not confuse but will delight our customers. If you go to the last slide, I want to talk for just a second about what we've seen on the mobile ticketing. It's not often we get to talk about the details, but we've not done a full marketing press on this. There's not been a press release on this system. But if you look at these numbers, and these are a little dated, this was as of May, we've seen over 4,500 people download the application and create accounts. What that means is these people have, through word of mouth, through reference, through various means, they've discovered that we've got this application, they've told their friends about it, and they've shared it. So we consider 4,500, and I believe the number was up to 4,600 or 4,700 now at this point in time. Like I said, this slide was put together a few weeks ago when we began this process. I know we're over $80,000 in revenue collected, and if you look down at the bottom right, total number of bus and rail tickets is over 14,500. So of those 4,500 accounts or people that have it, they've purchased 14,500 tickets. So you're seeing multiple uses. We are tracking the utilization on a daily basis, and we look forward to doing a coordinated marketing effort, which will, we anticipate, explode these numbers. Once the general public knows that the mobile ticketing system's out, you don't have to be a technophile to find it. We anticipate very rapid adoption of that, and we're preparing for that. Next slide, please. This concludes our status updates on what's been happening. Turn the floor to you, Marsh.
Thank you, Albert. Appreciate it very much. That's a lot of information, but once again, it's wonderful to see this technology move forward. And also what you mentioned concerning preparing for the transition to the AFC 2.0 is also a big part of this. And so wonderful. I'm glad to see that we're going to be able to deliver more of this flexibility services to our customers. All right. Are there any questions for the board members concerning this briefing? Any comments? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay. The next briefing that we have is from Diversity and Inclusion. Paula Nash, Executive Director of Diversity and Inclusion. You have the floor.
Thank you. So, good morning. Well, actually, I think it's afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Frierson, Mr. Parker, Mr. Srinath, and members of the board. I'm Paula Nash, Executive Director of Diversity and Inclusion, and this is the Office of Diversity and Inclusion update. And since we have several new board members since my last update, I'll also explain a little bit about our office. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion is a compliance office, and we're here to monitor, ensure, and report compliance on a number of federal laws and regulations. We develop and file several programs and plans with the FTA, and these programs focus on one, MARTA having equitable and diverse representation and advancement of its employees. 2, equitable services and amenities to our patrons. And 3, utilization of small and disadvantaged businesses in our procurements. Next slide, please. So there are 3 business units or teams within the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. The Equal Employment Opportunity Team is led by Manager Adelaide Jewett. And this team is primarily responsible for monitoring the EEO or Equal Employment Opportunity Program, the Title VI program, and the ADA plan. And I will give just a little bit more details about those in just a moment. The second team is our Supplier Diversity Unit, which is led by Manager Pamela Smith. And this team is responsible for all aspects of our Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, including the Small Business Enterprise Program and DBE certifications. The third unit is our Outreach Unit, which is led by Evelyn Richards. And this team assists with all of the previously mentioned programs and plans, and they do this through outreach efforts to diverse organizations and businesses, as well as outreach efforts to our internal partners. Next slide, please. So the Equal Employment Opportunity Program requires investigating discrimination complaints or Title VII complaints. So these can be race, sex, religion, national origin, disabilities, retaliation, investigating those types of complaints. And as part of this program, we also provide training on EEO matters, and we develop policies that cover EEO or Title VII matters. And one last thing we do is we monitor workforce demographics as part of that program, the EEO program. So our Title VI program requires equitable services and amenities to our patrons. And this is mostly monitored through equity analysis when there are major service changes, fair analysis when we do a fair change, and then service standards reviews. This team also conducts Title VI investigations, which are discrimination complaints from our patrons. And the team makes sure that essential documents and information are translated to required languages, as is required by the FTA and MARTA's Language Assistance Plan. The EEO unit is also responsible for system-wide ADA compliance, which includes monitoring accessibility issues, handling mobility eligibility and no-show appeals, and the mystery customer program, in which we have riders use the system and provide reports to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and operations. Next slide, please. So next we'll look at the 2020 metrics. And for this unit, the EEO unit, regarding investigations, there were 72 allegations made during that time frame. And I must let you know that a complaint may have multiple allegations. For instance, a complaint can have a race and a retaliation allegation. The top 3 allegations were sexual harassment, disability discrimination, and race discrimination. There were actually 18 internal complaints. So of those 18 complaints, 4 were found to be discrimination. 6 were transferred to employee relations, because even though there were no discrimination found, there were other policy violations. And so that's why they were sent to employee relations. And then there were 8 where there were no cause findings at all. So we use the data to help tailor our training. And so, for instance, in 2020, we increased our sexual harassment training. And we also just ramped it up again recently. So there were 1,328 ADA inquiries. These inquiries come in through the customer service department, and they are provided to our office. And just to let you know, one incident can create numerous inquiries, because I know this number looks high, but one incident can create numerous inquiries. An example is, during the pandemic, the closing of the front door of buses led to many inquiries from our ADA patrons. We use these inquiries to provide notifications and to also provide additional training. So lastly, for this unit, there were 783 mystery customer shops performed. And again, this is where we have a vendor secretly monitor ADA related services and compliance while riding our system. Next slide, please. So looking at the supplier diversity unit, The cornerstone of that unit is the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, or our DBE program. Our team reviews solicitations, determines if a DBE goal should be met and it should be set, and if so, what that goal should be. We monitor goal participation and that DBEs are being used to perform a commercially useful function, and we handle payment disputes between DBEs and primes. And we also provide regular reports to the FTA. Now, some of you may wonder how we determine DBE goals and why do some procurements have a 0 DBE goal. So to determine DBE goals, we use a methodology where we look at particular areas of work and potential opportunities for DBE firms. We relate this work to NAICE codes, or North American Industry Classification System codes. So looking at firms that have those specific codes, we take the number of DBE firms and divide it by the number of all firms with those codes, and that gives us our goal percentage. Now that's kind of a simplified version of it, but that's the basics. So why sometimes is there a 0 goal? The number one reason that there are no, or that there's a 0 goal, is that there are no or very few DBEs certified in the identified areas. Now, we also assign a 0 goal if we're getting the vendor from the state of Georgia contract, or if it's a sole source procurement, and then also if it's a transit vehicle manufacturers, the companies that manufacture our bus or trains. And that's because those particular companies have to give their DBE goals and programs directly to the FTA. So our Small Business Enterprise Program is a race and gender neutral program intended to foster business participation and competition by small businesses. It is used for our procurements that are under 200,000, and we do not set any DBE goals for these procurements. So the team for the Small Business Enterprise Program also disseminates procurement opportunities externally, and they provide lists from the DBE directory to contracts and procurements and other internal departments for specific small procurements. They measure DBE usage and payments, and then through this program, we also help develop small businesses to be able to better obtain contracts and by networking events, classes, and mentoring programs. So the Supplier Diversity Unit also performs DBE certifications. And when doing this, we assess ownerships of businesses, determine the personal wealth of owners, and conduct site visits to determine if an applicant meets the quality. And this team also does annual updates. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So looking at the metrics, in FY 2020, there was a 30% DBE participation, which of course exceeded our 25% goal. But that amount is just on our federal contracts. And although that's what gets reported to the FTA, you know from presentations every month that MARTA also puts goals on its locally funded procurements. So the great news is that for overall local and federal funded procurements combined, there was a 39% DBE participation. And in just a few seconds, I will show you more details on that. So looking at our small business contracts, even though we do not set DBE goals for this program, we achieved 15% DBE participation on the contracts under 200,000. And of course, all of this was through race and gender neutral means. And then we processed 683 new and annual DBE and ACDBE, which are airport concession DBE certifications. That's an increase from 2019, where we processed only 499 certifications. So currently, for our certifications, we're implementing new procedures to speed up the certification process, and I will come back to that shortly. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier for FY20, with the combination of federal and local dollar procurement awards, we reached the DBE participation of 39%. Here we show the actual dollar amount of $123 million that went to DBEs. And of course, I don't want to downplay the DBE award dollars for FY18 and FY19 because they were also significant. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk a little bit about our DBE certification process, because we recognize that is an area where we have had our share of challenges. So the FTA regulations state that certifications should be completed within 90 days of receiving all required documents. And we are falling considerably short of that mark. So for calendar year 2020, only 85% of certifications were being processed in less than 90 days. Then within the last few months, we had a staff member resign and we lost a little ground. So you see in May of 2021, only 76% of certifications were being processed within the 90 days. But our goal is to increase our resources and streamline our processes to a point that we can ensure that all certifications will be done below the 90-day threshold. And we plan to start that process in July. And in fact, we want to get way below the 90-day threshold. That's our ultimate goal. Next slide, please. So our outreach program was extremely robust in 2020. This unit works with internal departments, our service community, and numerous and diverse organizations to make the community aware of opportunities at MARTA. And these are both employment opportunities as well as procurement opportunities. So we didn't let the pandemic stop our outreach. Events that we used to do in person became webinars and virtual workshops. The MAT committee, which is our MARTA Accessibility Committee, continued their meetings as scheduled. They were just done virtually. We held virtual webinars such as how to do business with MARTA and I'm DBE certified, now what? And we still partnered with a number of diverse organizations in an effort to increase DBE suppliers. Next slide, please. So looking at the outreach metrics, there were 126 events. Now, not all of those events were hosted by MARTA. We also sat on many panels. We participated in what is called matchmaking events, and we did virtual exhibitions. We had 11 targeted partners, and we tried to reach people from organizations through numerous modes of communications, including social media, emails, and exhibits. And since I've mentioned our events, I'd like to take this moment to thank board member Stacy Blakely, who helped us team up with NABWIC, National Association of Black Women in Construction, for a virtual event on how to do business with MARTA. Next slide, please. So I won't talk about all the accomplishments, but I do want to highlight a couple of things that we started during this year. So we started the year with a focus on sexual harassment training, and we trained over 700 new employees and managers. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get as many managers trained as we hoped. So in conjunction with learning and development, we have relaunched the managers training and hope to have all managers trained in sexual harassment by the end of August. So we also launched MARTA's Small Business Development Program and work with UGA's Small Business Development Center and getting some companies trained in areas that should help them in the future be successful in obtaining larger contracts with MARTA as well as with other companies. So we're pleased about that. Next slide, please. So a few highlights of upcoming projects. The EEO unit, at the recommendation of our MAC committee, we are creating ADA educational videos discussing the accessibility of our system. Our supplier diversity team, in July, we will launch what is called Inclusion Matters seminars, and Mr. Parker just talked about those a little bit, but these are seminars where we're bringing in our vendors with the largest contracts, and it's geared towards just enhancing minority participation and explaining the importance of minority participation in these contracts. And then our outreach group is launching our employee resource groups, as I explained last month at the External Relations Committee meetings. So we will launch those during the first quarter of FY22. Next slide, please. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Paula Nash. We appreciate that that briefing. Once again, you know, the diversion and inclusion part of this of MARTA is extremely important to us, and we want to see more disadvantaged businesses to participate in the whole program. And I know you're making an effort to do that, so I see that and I appreciate it. Are there any other comments from the board members you want to share? Any questions?
Hi, Mr. Frierson.
Yes, yes, Chair Scott.
I have and maybe I missed it, hopefully I didn't, but first of all, thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you, Ms. Blakely, for your input in the area of minority women. I appreciate the input with the Diversity and Inclusion Department. In regards to just a couple of questions, and I thought about it during the last presentation, and that is when a company does not meet the goals set forth by the FTA, and we say they are making a good faith effort. How do they provide you with the information, or do they provide you with the information? And if they do not meet the goal, do they provide you with an outline or process to show you when or how they're attempting to reach that goal?
Sure. Yes, ma'am. Let me answer that. So when we're looking at the good faith efforts, if a company has come and they said, hey, we can't meet the goal, but we're trying to make good faith efforts, yes, they have to document their good faith efforts. So they have to actually document it in writing, because we have to have a file for the FTA. So we require that they document everything that they've done to try to meet that goal in writing. And so this can be, we've contacted companies off the DBE directory and the particular NACE codes, and they're saying that they can't provide the service. And what my office does a lot of times is we follow up. We then contact those particular companies because they have to give us the names of the company. So we contact them and say, hey, were you contacted by this company? And did you say you couldn't do the service? Just to make sure that, you know, they're just not trying to put one over on us. So another thing we do is we also, and this was the case of the company we talked about earlier. Sometimes if we, you know, are concerned that, you know, is it our directory that's lacking things, or is the company just not doing what they should towards minority businesses or DBEs, we'll do some research on that company. And so what we look at is whether or not they have a supplier diversity program, if it's a national company, what that program is actually doing, the specific dollar amounts. We'll ask them to provide it to us. How much have you done in the last year? What type of companies did you use? Show us a listing of your companies, because sometimes it may just be for the area that they're in. Georgia doesn't have enough DBEs in that area, but maybe when they're doing it in other places, they do. And so we look at that as well. And there are a number of other things that we look at, but when we're trying to determine good faith efforts, we literally dig deep and make sure that they are trying to do what we are requiring. And if it proves, we're able to show, oh, well, they aren't able to meet the 10% goal because our research shows that as well, then that's when we give the good faith efforts. But we do continue to monitor them. And, if situations change, we also, want them to take advantage of that. There's new companies on the DBE directory because it changes all the time. Or if some scope of their work changes, that tends to lead up to new opportunities as well. Hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I do have one question, Ms. Nash. How many DB companies do you have in the MARTA directory?
So the directory isn't a MARTA directory. It's the Georgia UCP directory. So it's everybody that MARTA certifies, everybody that GDOT certifies, it's everybody that's in the MARTA program. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know the exact number. I can get back to you, but it's thousands.
It is, okay. Good, because that does help with matching businesses with these various projects that may come out that we're asked to be bid on, right?
Oh, definitely it does. So
Yes.
the directory is broken down so that it gives us the different NACE codes so that we can look at the scope of work and match those companies. And we do that. We provide to contracts and procurement. We provide when the big proposals go out, or solicitation goes out, we provide a list of companies that we feel that are in that scope of work, a list of DBE companies.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may.
Roberta? Go right ahead, Ms. Roberta.
Thank you, Ms. Nash, for a very thorough presentation, lots of information. My question to you is regarding veterans as a DBE, and I noticed that we don't have any, and I wonder if there's any plans in the works to look at veterans, male and female, for providing services as a DBE.
So sure, let me address that. So thank you for that question, Ms. Abdul Salam. Veterans under the federal law, they are not a category for DBEs. But what our office would like to do, because that unit we call our supplier diversity unit. So we still want to reach those groups that don't qualify as DBEs, but they're still small businesses. So veterans, there are a lot of other groups that would be considered out there that don't qualify as DBEs. And so we still want to educate those groups, educate them on how to get contracts, how to get contracts with MARTA as well as other companies, but we will not be able to actually include them in our DBE participation number unless that law gets changed by the federal government.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Nash. Appreciate it. Any other questions from the board?
Chair Frierson, this is Stacy Blakely.
Yes, go ahead, Mrs. Blakely.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge and thank both Luz and Paula following up from our discussion back in April and making improvements to the certification process. I share with them, just some experiences and my personal experience and some, others that I've been made aware of. And I want to thank them because after our discussion, they took the initiative to implement KPIs on, improving the process. And Paula, my question for you today is back on the certification processing time slide.
Yes.
In 2020, there was like almost 800 records that were processed, which is
Yes.
about 60 applications a month. But in May, we only had 13. Do you guys have any idea why there's such a large decrease in the amount of records even, processed or
Sure.
presented?
I do. So there are a couple of reasons why there was fewer processed in May. One is resources. I lost a staff member, and so that cut down on the number that were processed. And then the other is the remaining of the remaining two staff members. One of them was out for 2 weeks in May, and so that kind of really cut down a lot on what we were able to do for May. But we are in the process of hiring a new staff person. And so I hope to have them on in hopefully the next couple of weeks.
Okay, understood. So that number doesn't actually reflect the number that were submit. I was thinking that was more along the lines of the number of records that were submitted, not just necessarily processed. Okay.
No, it's the number that was processed. Now, I can tell you this because I don't remember the exact number, but I do remember looking at it. We did have a lot fewer submitted in May as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much, Ms. Nash. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay. The last item we have on agenda and other matters is just some information from Raj concerning FY 2021 April financial highlights and financial performance indicators. Raj, you want to share some information?
I'll be happy to, Mr. Frierson. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Just want to briefly mention that, as I've presented in the last two or three business management committee sessions, we continue to have a surplus. The surplus, the budget surplus as of the end of April is about $120 million. A combination of both surpluses in revenues as well as a reduction in expenses. And the surpluses in revenues are predominantly a result of receiving the stimulus or the CARES Act funding from the federal government, which offset the losses we had in the fair revenues, and also partially due to increased sales tax revenues compared to our budget. The sales tax revenues have been pretty robust, and they continue to be robust on that. So those were the two main contributing reasons for the increases in revenues compared to our budget. And the expenses, again, nothing has changed. The underlying reasons remain the same. We have had about roughly 400 vacancies that has resulted in a considerable decrease in salaries, wages, and commensurate benefits as well. So, and also on the mobility services, again, it's a reflection of overall ridership. Ridership, as we all know, has been considerably down from what we had projected. So that has translated to lower ridership in the mobility services as well, and which translates to lower costs. So those are the primary reasons. And one other point I do want to note, kind of a little bit of a good news, I guess, silver lining. We have seen slight increases in ridership in the months of April and March as well.
Okay.
Hopefully that will, 2 months really don't make a trend, but it's definitely a positive development, and we do hope the trend continues on to the next month and the next fiscal year. So with that, I'll stop. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Raj. We're glad to hear that ridership is at least trending in a favorable direction. And Once again, the financial information, the details of it are in the packet that was sent to all the board members. Are there any other questions we have for Raj? Any other comments from the board members? All right, thank you very much, Raj. I appreciate your information. With all matters being addressed, I'd like to go ahead and call the business management meeting to adjourned. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Everyone have a great day.
Okay.
You too.